Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and this is a brand new LEGO set, the NASA Artemis Space Launch System, which is one of the more unique, realistic style LEGO sets that we've gotten in a long time. Not only are we getting a realistic style spacecraft that is based off of a real-world spaceship, but we also are getting a fully detailed launch tower to go alongside it, which is to date the most detailed space launch tower we have ever gotten from LEGO. This harkens back to some of the most impressive LEGO sets that they've done, like the NASA Saturn V rocket, which you can see here from LEGO Ideas, but puts its own spin on it because this is really giving us two in one. The set will retail for $260 when it releases on May 15, and it has been provided to me by LEGO for review. I can't wait to get into the details of the set, and let's jump into the review right now. So this right here is set number 10341. It is the NASA Artemis Space Launch System. It will retail for $260 when it releases on May 15th, which is going to be a bit of a LEGO Insiders preview before it becomes available for full sale later on. This is a really interesting model, and it is one of the only times that LEGO has done a full-on realistic space launch rocket and system that is NASA branded in recent history. Sure, we've gotten a couple from LEGO City that have their own classic space twist on them, and we've gotten a few in the past that come with a much more simpler rocket but a much more detailed launch system, but this is one of the first models that really goes all in on the realistic detail. For $260, it has 3,601 pieces, making it a pretty good deal, especially when you consider the price per part ratio, but do also keep in mind that many of those pieces are very, very small. There's a lot of repetitive, small detail, especially in the way that you construct the launch tower, and this set absolutely is not for everyone. You definitely have to have a lot of patience when putting it together, but the final result is really, really cool. Let's take a closer look at this set, and I hope you enjoy this early review. Once again, this set retails for $260 and comes with the space launch system, so the entire building and crane used to launch the rocket itself, plus the Artemis rocket, which launched in 2022. Obviously, there are two major core components of the set itself, so what we're going to do for this review is really just focus in on the tower first, and then take a look at the rocket because most of the pieces in the set actually go towards building the tower. While they're both attached, you can see there's a very smooth mechanism to have all of the fueling components expand and retract at the same time, as well as a separate and more manual extension for the place where the crew actually boards onto the spaceship itself. There are a couple of additional arms attached to the sides of the rocket as well, and these are pretty much the only two things that actually anchor the rocket on studs. The rest of the rocket pretty much exists on its own and standalone, and you can see it wobbles back and forth ever so slightly when you actually have it just sitting on there without anything attached. We'll once again set aside the rocket, and here's what it looks like in comparison to the tower in terms of height, and just focus in on the tower build itself. Now, if folks are expecting a creative build that will teach you new things and a build that is engaging throughout, maybe this may not be the set for you. The build is very, very reminiscent of the large-scale Eiffel Tower, which just released a couple of years ago, in both good ways and bad. It looks really good, it is very, very impressively tall, the height is incredibly high. However, there are a lot of extremely repetitive details, and one of my favorite parts was actually building the base because, at least for the base, you're doing all sorts of different things. As you can see, there's even the interior factored into the base itself, where you can see the inside of the staircase leading up to the top of the rocket launch zone, which is definitely a detail they did not need to include, but I'm really impressed they managed to factor that in. All around the sides of the base, there is studs on the side construction to achieve the amount of detail, and going up the sides of the tower, they even have these very, very detailed element components where you just have, again, very repetitive stacking of lightsaber hilt elements as well as Sensei Wu Ninjago staff and stick pieces just forming up the sides of the tower itself. Most of the main construction is incredibly repetitive, taking the 1x4 and 1x3 Speed Champions elements, which have curves associated with them, and sticking in some bar elements to allow you to build up the frame of the tower itself. If you've built the Eiffel Tower, you know exactly what I'm talking about when you have to basically build the exact same structure over and over and over again until you actually have the tower be complete, with very little variation between them. That being said, there is still a good amount of different things that you do in the build to keep it a little bit interesting, especially as you go alongside it. It isn't 100% fully symmetrical. There are details like the red pipings and the roller coaster elements factored on the sides that really break it up, and of course the whole loading mechanism here for the crew is really nice, and I really do appreciate the usage of the turntable piece to allow the crew to load. This mechanism, which you can see demonstrating right here to allow the refueling components to attach onto the rocket, is also very slick and well done. It was a ton of fun seeing the way the linkages actually worked to be able to have this mechanism function, and it's really interesting because the instruction manual specifically calls out some of the pieces used here, like the turntable element, as brand new, whereas that element actually was introduced quite a few years ago, which makes me actually suspect that this model might have been built and ready to go years ago, but LEGO may have decided to hold it off until release, until this year when they were actually celebrating the years of LEGO Space. Just kind of a strange thing because most of the other new parts in the set are not necessarily brand new and have been around for at least a couple of years. The only other mechanism here is this piece, which I kind of wish was something that was mounted with a little bit more friction, but essentially this is the arm that's mounted to attach onto the sides of the rocket to keep it in place, and otherwise you can see the entire construction of the model is very repetitive, very monochrome as well. I will say it is very nice to have a special information plaque included in the set, which you can see right here in detail. Unfortunately, the piece is a sticker and is not printed. The set also comes with a separate displayable stand for the crew module, which is really nice. It basically serves as the habitat for the crew while they're traveling to the moon and provides astronauts with food, water, oxygen, and protection from space radiation. I love how they actually made a brand new printed element for the top nose cone there. It's using the existing pieces we've seen on Star Wars droids, but it's a brand new print for it, which is really nice. Moving onwards, we can take a look at the entire SLS system here. Of course, this is including the engine section, the nozzle, the core stage, the Orion spacecraft, the solid rocket boosters, the service module, the crew module, and the launch abort system. We're going to start off by taking a closer look at the sides here, which you can see are the side solid rocket boosters. Now, this is using a combination of printed elements as well as stickers. I will have to say though, some of the stickers were very small and a little bit annoying to put on, especially because many of those stickers either wrap around the entire cylinders or are just basically really small stickers that are mounted on the same distance as a 1x1 stud. The solid rocket boosters are attached to the core stage by using a very simple and standard clip system, which I think works really well, and personally I was very impressed by the usage of the LEGO Technic quote-unquote comma panel pieces to still maintain the cylindrical shape of the side solid rocket boosters while allowing it to actually have those bar attachments, which worked out really well. However, I will say that attaching these stickers, as I mentioned, wasn't the most fun thing, especially for these two solid rocket boosters. I would have appreciated it if more of it was printed, although I do understand the technical limitations. I don't think LEGO can actually print these all the way around, so they were able to print them where they could, but again, they had to make some compromises here and there. With that detached, the rest of the rocket can be seen right here with the main core stage section. It's the tallest rocket stage NASA has ever built, as a fun fact, and building this part of the rocket was absolutely a breath of fresh air compared to the rest of the structure. A lot of it is built using studs on these side techniques, and just overall has a lot of interesting building techniques factored into it. The really interesting part of the rocket though comes with the actual playable section on the top. As you can see here, by removing these side orange panels, you can gain access to the actual Orion spacecraft, which is made up of 3 elements, all of which can detach: the launch abort system, the crew module, and the service module, and it's really cool seeing how you can actually detach all of the different components to make this a fully playable toy. First off, as you can see at the top here, the launch abort system can be completely removed, and then you take off the top cap, which is fully printed, to reveal the inside of the Orion spacecraft. Now on the inside, as you can see, there is just a plain blue rod there, but the really cool thing is that that rod is actually just meant to be a placeholder, because you could actually take the separate detachable system of the crew module, fold up the separate solar powered wings on the sides, and then actually use it to be launched and loaded into the spacecraft itself. It's a nice integration that honestly I wasn't really expecting when I first saw images of the box. I was not expecting there to be a ton of playable aspects to the spacecraft, and it's really impressive how you can actually factor the crew module inside the spaceship itself. The way it works is that you place on one of the hemispheres here, just slot it on the inside. It doesn't even attach to any studs, it just kind of sits in place. You stick the other side on, place the cone up at the top, which again, that cone is fully printed, which is very nice, and then you place the LES, the launch abort system, on the top of it, and it works out really well as the Orion spacecraft just on its own. It's a cool thing if you want to display this separate from the actual craft, and to reattach it, it's also very, very simple. All you need to do is stick it on inwards. It again doesn't attach on any studs, it basically just kind of balances and sits there, and is held into place by the dark orange hemispheres on either side. You can see some studs on the side connections that really help attach it securely. Altogether, that brings us to the completed element of the NASA SLS with all of the different components attached. Let's put on the solid rocket boosters now, and then we can do an overview of the set in general. I do want to talk about the size, the value, and the building experience as we sum up the overall review. Altogether, this was a really interesting set, and one of my favorite parts about it was actually learning a lot more about how the Artemis 4 rocket works. They actually made this to honor the Apollo missions from the 1960s to 1970s, which obviously Artemis is the goddess of the moon, so that's kind of why it was named this way. And it's interesting because this is one of the more ambitious NASA projects they've ever announced. To overcome the pull of gravity, the SLS produced nearly 4 million kilograms of thrust, and of course, making its way to the moon and back to the Earth for re-entry. It endured some crazy temperatures to be able to actually make it back to Earth, and it was really cool learning about that throughout the building instructions, which taught you step by step about each stage of the rocket you were building. It's as much of an educational toy as it is a display model, and that's one of the things I really do appreciate about something like this. Overall, this was a really interesting educational set, albeit very, very repetitive in the building. The building experience, I will say, was not the most fun. I definitely feel like the building experience overall was incredibly repetitive, and you do have to have a lot of patience when putting it together. But you cannot deny the final result just looks really good. The functionality, especially with the rocket installed onto the platform, just is very clean and works really well. I love the way that they actually have the fuel things look like they're attached to the rocket itself, and the final product is really, really impressive and unlike any other LEGO set that they've released in the past. Value-wise, there's a lot of small pieces here, but I do really feel like I am getting a lot of bang for my buck. With $260, this feels like pretty good value. And with that, we have summed up my review of the brand new NASA Artemis space launch set. It's really, really interesting to get an icon set that has this much detail in it, packed in with a very realistic style of building and rocket. This definitely is one for very avid space fans and folks who really are big fans of NASA and realistic space. It certainly is one of the more interesting space launch sets we've ever gotten from LEGO, and I'm really curious to see how this performs. It is not the most dynamic toy. While there are play features, the build is very, very tedious, and be prepared to be putting these same pieces together over and over again. But the end result is really, really phenomenal. You can clearly see that a lot of love and artistry and detail went into crafting this, and I hope you enjoyed our full-on early review of this brand new LEGO set, again retailing for $260, which I'm actually pretty happy about. Given the amount of stuff that you get in the set, this definitely has a better price per part ratio than a lot of other sets out there, although I will say that it is very, very niche. You have to be either really into space, realistic space, really into LEGO to, I think, get the full appreciation out of the set. So while it's not for everyone, it is still a very, very remarkable build. I cannot wait to see what else LEGO will do for space later on this year and hopefully in future years as well. Thank you so much for tuning in to this review, and let me know in the comments, what do you think of this brand new LEGO set? Alright, and with that, we have summed up my review of the NASA Artemis Space Launch System. Definitely one of the most interesting models they've come up with for LEGO icons and LEGO space. I'm a big fan of the way the set turned out, and I cannot wait to see what else LEGO does with space in the future. But of course, let me know in the comments, what do you think of the set? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? And will you be getting the set when it releases later in May? Thanks so much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this review. Be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon, and bye for now.